just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly.
Wow.
In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's Libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we're pleased to have with us as our guest Jeffrey Tucker. He's a director of digital development for the Foundation for Economic Education and Chief Liberty Officer of Liberty.me, a global liberty community of which I am proud to say that I am a card-carrying member. Today we will start our dialogue with a discussion on the most misunderstood subject bantered about by our presidential hopefuls, and that is open or closed borders, depending on your perspective. Jeffrey, welcome to our program. It's a pleasure to have and an honor to have you on our show.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's awesome.
Well, thank you so much. We had over a half-hour delay, and thank you for your patience. You know, some days you think that maybe nothing's going to go right, but we finally connected everything for some reason. We don't know why we had our problems, but somehow it healed itself. I guess we had a healing prayer or something like that. Well, Jeffrey, I of all of the subjects topics that are discussed during the presidential debates, I guess the two biggies would be, of course, the greatest threat to America is ISIS, which in my opinion is not just the American government. But the second one has got to be the open borders or closed borders issue, of which I categorically disagree generally with about every one of the candidates. Now, you, I understand, are open borders advocate. Is that true? And if that's true, could you tell me why? And how could all these brilliant men running for office be wrong?
Yeah. Well, it's really easy. You know, it's the easiest thing in the world to whip up the public against, fear of the other, especially foreign invasion of sort of, swarthy people who don't speak English. People get all hysterical about this. And there's a kind of a nativism that all this stuff plays to. And it works. I was there when Donald Trump gave one of his first speeches about the topic. This was last June or something like that. And, I guess maybe it was July, it was at Freedom Fest. And he started going on about immigration. I was like, why is he talking about immigration? It's not even an issue. And indeed, if you look at the public opinion polls, immigration is less controversial in the summer than it had been in something like 20 years, So he just made this up out of whole cloth, got the whole audience whipped up in a fear of Mexican rapists and so on. And it really worked for him. It's a kind of an unbelievable example of political demagoguery. When people actually think about the reality of immigration, immigration's awesome for us. Every day we benefit from immigration. Every day. Whether it's the highly skilled craftsmen that are mostly immigrant populations that do things that nobody in the U.S. knows how to do, or restaurants we eat at, or the technicians who give us Google search engines. I visited Google recently, and something like a third of the best technicians at Google come from India. And I thought, look at this. The hoi polloi out there, trashing immigrants and, aren't they terrible? They're ruining our culture, poisoning the race or whatever. But meanwhile, they're using the products that these guys are creating every single day. They just don't have any clue.
Right. Well, it's interesting because whenever you say open borders, one of the first things that comes to mind to most people is that we're being invaded. We have to know who's coming in, who they are. We have to qualify them to make sure that they're not entering the United States to perpetrate some horrendous crime on humanity while here in the United States.
Yeah.
And I often wonder, I wonder if someone belonged to a professional terrorist organization that wanted to do irreparable harm to the United States, whether or not they would spend days and days in the hot deserts in Mexico, crossing that country to get here. Wouldn't they just fly in? Or take a boat and land somewhere and just get off and take their equipment, blow something up, and get back on and leave? To me, it doesn't pass a laugh test the way they talk about it. And although
it taps into these deep fears, right? People have this weird kind of fear of the other. People are very willing to blame foreigners for all their own domestic problems. And these, like I say, these politicians who sort of tap into this with dog whistles and so on, are really just after their own political power. It has nothing to do with the facts at hand. I mean, if you look at the facts of immigration, I mean, immigrants are far less likely to receive welfare in the sense that we think of what welfare is, far less likely to commit crimes. The relationship between immigration and terrorism is not at all. We have our own homegrown problem of terrorism right here in the U.S. It is completely unrelated to immigration. So, I mean, you asked me what convinced me of open borders. It was just looking at the facts on the ground. I just kind of went through every one of the arguments and realized that they were all incorrect. There's another problem. Once you start restricting immigration, that means definitely control of the domestic civilian population. That's what a lot of these people are not coming to terms with. If you're going to limit immigration, you also have to be able to investigate every business, every home, every church. You have to really establish a surveillance state right here in the U.S. It's not as simple as building a wall. You have to have, like E-Verify, like Rubio is always talking about. You really have to have a kind of a totalitarian system, and if you're going to start stepping away from open borders.
Yeah, I don't really understand when they say that we should qualify people coming in, we should check them out and all this other good stuff. I don't know how you would do that. You have someone from a third world country who desires to come here, who is not looking for welfare, is not looking for a handout, wants to work, perform functions that American-born individuals probably would refuse to do at that particular wage level. We need these people. I mean, how does this person prove their innocence? In other words, you're guilty until proven innocent, but that's not possible.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is very strange. It's a lot like gun control in the sense that the people who are going to comply with the law are the people who keep the law anyway. But the people who are the real outlaws, people you should have to worry about, are not going to pay any attention to these laws anyway. They're going to get in one way or another. So It doesn't. All you're doing is ending liberty for Americans. And you hear all kinds of other arguments about immigration, like, we have to protect the culture. Well, there's plenty of things that go on in this culture that are not compatible with liberty, as far as I'm concerned. We're going to start controlling speech, controlling how people vote, or the birth rates. That's another thing. People say, we have to have controls on immigration because it's going to mess up the demographics. You hear this all the time, especially from sort of members of the white bourgeoisie. They're always concerned about the demographics. Well, if you're so concerned about demographics, maybe we need a China-style birth rule too. I mean, you start looking at eugenics actually under those conditions, and which in fact, that's how American immigration policy started. We didn't have any kind of immigration policy, from the 17th century up into the 19th century. It all began basically in the 1920s, and it was all driven by eugenics concerns. And that, I'm not just making wild conspiracy claims here. This is just a fact. I mean, the people who were behind lobbying for and voting for and pushing and funding all those immigration restrictions in the 1920s were scientific cranks. I mean, they believed that immigration of Southern Italians and Jews in particular were poisoning the race. That's why they wanted to stop it. I mean, this is just true. I have an article coming out. No, I had an article, I guess it was last week, on fee.org about this. I mean, it's just incontrovertible that the people who passed this legislation were all eugenicists. They were basically exterminationists, Well, very scary bunch.
We see the inscription on the Statue of Liberty. Give us your tired, your hungry, your huddled masses yearning to be free. I'm sorry if I muddled that up a little bit, but yearning to be free. We say that, we don't mean it. I mean, why don't we just take it off the Statue of Liberty? We don't adhere to that. People don't understand it, and we don't practice it. So why have it there? Why be hypocrites?
I want this country to not be hypocritical. This is supposed to be a bastion of freedom. And I tell you, the culture, the economy, everything would be better in the U.S. if we had opened up immigration. We have extreme controls on immigration. People talk about all the time about the problem of illegal immigration. Well, that's a little bit like talking about the problem of bootleggers in the 1920s. If you make something illegal, which the U.S. has more or less done with immigration over the last, 20 years or so, yeah, people are going to do it illegally, But this is a problem of the law. It's not a problem of individual behavior any more than bootleggers. The reason for bootleggers was prohibitionism. The reason for illegal immigration, the reason we have whatever people say, 12 million, 14 million illegal immigrants living here peacefully and productively, is a consequence of the law. It's not because people are themselves negligent in compliance. When you have bad law, people are going to break it. There's nothing you can do about that. Yeah. So I'd like to see us have an open immigration policy. I think it would be awesome. Yeah. I don't even believe in borders. I don't. What's interesting to me? People, as soon as you talk about getting rid of borders, people are panicked about immigration from Mexico for some reason. It's very strange to me. You know that in the 1920s immigration acts, where all these eugenicists were concerned about the racial stock of America and how it was being poisoned, they didn't even address immigration from the southern border for whatever reason. That wasn't even an issue. It was never limited. And even when I was growing up in a border town in Texas, El Paso, Texas, you could drive back and forth between the U.S. and Mexico with no papers at all. It was just a sign. Now entering Mexico. I mean, that's in my lifetime. And we didn't have it. It wasn't a problem. Yeah, you had constant immigration demographic shifts, but it was awesome. People would come, people would go, and it worked. It worked for everybody. It works a lot better than government planning works.
Here we live here in Oklahoma, and we can make the same case on immigration with Kansas. We can say, well, Kansas is a different state. We are anyone coming from Kansas to Oklahoma, should prove their citizenship or whatever. We can play that game. What I find very interesting is before the formation of the European Union, when I was younger, I was in Europe for a while, and I recall walking down a street, and it was a residential area. The typical European. 2 or 3 story, I guess 2-story houses, all in a row. They all look the same as far as the eye can see. Narrow sidewalk. And I came to an intersection where there was a concrete sort of structure. And I looked at it, and it had an F, the letter F on it. And I looked at it, and I had no idea what it meant. And then I looked around it, and there was nothing on the side. But on the other side, there was an S. Like an S as in Sam. And I'm looking at it, and someone passed by, and with my luck, the person actually spoke English a lot better than I did, in fact. And I said, what is the S and the F? They said, oh, that's France, that's Switzerland. And it just struck me that here I am on a street corner. There were very few cars, very few people around, but people were walking in, out, and everywhere. And there was no guards, just this little concrete abutment, that had the S and the F, so you know whether or not you were in the country of Switzerland or the country of France. And I said, didn't see any guards, didn't see any illegal movement. There was nothing going on. And I just walked in. Believe it or not, I felt the exact same way I did before and after I passed that abutment. And I thought to myself, isn't that strange? I said, we always talk about immigration and all the problems we have. And I said, here people are flowing back and forth, and no one's the wiser, and no one cares.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, it's actually one of the awesome things going on around in the world today is the free immigration within the European Union. So now anybody can just travel anywhere. It's just very much a recreation of what it was like in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries in Europe. There's one passport for all of Europe, and people are free to move and to work wherever they want. It's not led to any disaster. All the European immigration problems that you see today are the result of outside EU refugee issues, which is mostly caused by U.S. wars, by the way. Yeah. But within Europe itself, This is one of the few bright spots in the world today for immigration, that you can be, in Spain, or you can be in France and Switzerland, and everybody can just freely move and work wherever they want to. I mean, it's just called freedom. And free immigration is just part of what it means to be free.
Well, people say, well, you really should check to see if they are terrorists, if they intend on harming the United States, and if they have any communicable diseases, to make sure that they don't infect the population. But when you think about it, how do you do that? Is that even possible?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've dealt with the government plenty. You have too. I mean, every time the government has the opportunity to control you, it screws it up in some way. Even such things as simple things like driver's licenses and registrations for driving. It's a calamitous bureaucracy. And if you ever deal with them, all you experience is irrationality, or deal with the TSA. How are they doing? At this. So you want to give these guys more power? I think it's a profound error.
Right. I mean, there really is no practical way to determine if someone is perfectly healthy, has no diseases whatsoever. I mean, the number of blood tests that each person would have to go through would be phenomenal, and they wouldn't be conclusive, and then you'd have to let them in. To me, it's so incredibly impractical. We don't do that now to a majority of them, so we'd have to do it to everyone, and the cost of entry health care, if you will, would be in the billions, if not trillions of dollars a year.
I think that's right. And by the way, my position on immigration does not just stem from a kind of, like I'm a libertarian first and therefore everything follows from that. I really did come to this position slowly and carefully. And I hadn't really taken a position on it for about 20 years. And it was only very recently. It's not that I was against free immigration. I just wasn't an issue I'd really thought about much, probably because I didn't want to think about it. So it's only been since I saw Trump's speech this summer, when I saw this wild man's rantings, that I really set out to think it through carefully. And then I went on John Stossel, argued for open borders. And I tell you what, I can't even describe to you what the result of that appearance was. I mean, I have been trolled so hard ever since that appearance. I mean, it's just been unbelievable. I mean, I've had to, ban like 400 Twitter accounts, for example. Just, I mean, it's just been unbelievable. But I thought about it very hard, and I just realized that, first of all the things that the opponents of free migration say are mostly wrong. There's that. The other thing is just to think through the relationship between liberty and migration. They really do go together. They've always been part of the same sort of thinking. It's just like free trade, free migration, free trade, private property, free association, free speech, freedom of religion. All these things are just part of a fabric. And if you pull one thread out of it, and the whole fabric falls apart.
Right.
So I don't think it's possible, for example, to be a libertarian and favor closed borders. I don't believe that anymore. I used to think it was possible, but I don't believe that anymore.
Back in the 1930s, the immigration from Mexico literally came to a halt, and that was because of the lack of economic opportunity in the United States because of the Depression. So that proved that immigration was not something where people came, or at least at that time, did not come to the United States to take advantage of our welfare state.
No.
But they came here to work. And immigration restrictions don't keep people out. They keep people in. Many of the people who come here and don't have the proper papers are afraid to admit that they're here because they want to go back to their families, but they cannot because they're afraid of being jailed. So what we do by having, and correct me if I'm wrong, by having all of these restrictions on immigration, those people who come here because there's no alternative for them, this is the best alternative that they have. When they come here, they're sort of stuck here. They don't want to stay. They want to go back. They want to go back to their families, but they can't. And sometimes they bring their families with them because they know they won't be able to return. So the immigration controls actually exasperate the situation that we're trying to alleviate. Do you agree with that?
I think that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that, but certainly, that's what immigration controls are used for. They end up controlling the domestic population in some way, and We've seen increasing restrictions on Americans migrating out of the U.S. It's harder and harder, actually, to leave, giving up your citizenship, and that does coincide with, increased restrictions on getting in. So yeah, they go together. Let me address really quickly this point about some people say that new immigrants, receive welfare at a far higher rate than the domestic population. If you actually look into the data, it all depends on what you consider to be welfare, and it turns out that a lot of the welfare consumption that people are referring to here are reduced price school lunches, which is overwhelmingly the kind of welfare, so-called, that these immigrants take. They go to public schools and they get reduced price free lunch. Well, I'm not even sure I would consider that to be welfare as traditionally understood. For one thing, this food is terrible. It's disgusting. The other thing is that the kids aren't even allowed to leave school grounds because of truancy laws to go out and get the latest dollar meal from McDonald's. And if they did, they could probably get cheaper food outside of the school. So all this food is price controlled anyway.
Right.
And, if they come along to you and, you enter the school and they go, what's your parents' income? And you tell them it's below $20,000 a family. And they go, okay, you qualify for reduced price lunches. What are you going to, of course, you're going to say, okay, that sounds kind of awesome. I'd rather pay $2 than $4. I mean, this is not welfare parasitism. This is just human rationality at work here. Yeah. This is not that big a deal. But once you exclude the free lunch program or the reduced price lunch program, then immigrants receive welfare at a far lower rate. Anything you'd normally consider welfare. Not to mention the fact they're paying vast amounts in taxes, far more than any immigrant gets in welfare. So this is just a non-issue. People always tell me, well, I won't favor open borders until we get rid of the welfare state. Well, right now, immigrants can't get welfare as traditionally understood. They can get very limited benefits, most of which are small, and they certainly pay more in taxes than receiving welfare. So this is not a valid argument.
Yeah. The presidential hopefuls, and I guess Donald Trump is one of the notables here.
Yeah.
Talks about how the immigration is taking jobs from Americans, and I don't think this guy's ever been in the workplace. Now, I have an occupational health testing company, so and at one time I was in every factory in the central part of the United States. I was in all of them, and I saw the mix of immigrants versus locals and whatever. And I didn't see that at all. Now, there are some places where they hire a larger number of immigrants, but primarily, and it's not intentional, only because those are the ones that apply for the job. They can't get people. So what is your take on Donald Trump's and the others saying that we want to save jobs for Americans, not foreigners?
Well, it doesn't make any economic sense. I think it's just an appeal to white supremacy, to tell you the truth. Let me tell you a funny story. Some years ago, I think it was about 10 years ago, Alabama passed a law against immigration. And it was widely supported in the House and the Senate and the State House and the Senate, and said, we're going to round up all the illegal Mexicans and send them back. Well, all the Mexicans in Alabama just fled. They actually took it seriously, thought it was going to happen. And for the next 6 months, it was an amazing thing to see happen. If you wanted tiles put in your bathroom, for example, you couldn't find anybody who knew how to do that damn thing. If you wanted a brick wall built, you couldn't find anybody. Nobody knows how to build a brick wall, apparently. And it became a serious problem for the public infrastructure because, it was only the undocumented Mexican workers in Alabama who knew how to pour tar and, make the streets. All the streets were falling in disrepair, And not to mention, the agricultural problems. So it just became a calamity. And basically these skill sets were not possessed by the domestic population. Yeah. So the law was quietly repealed, and all the undocumented workers came back and everything got back to normal again, and everybody just kind of swept it under the rug and forgot about it.
Jeffrey, if you could just hold on for a moment, would you mind holding until we have a quick station identification, and we'll be right back? Okay, folks, on our second portion of our program, we encourage you to call 646-652-4620 to make your comment or ask a question. That's 646-652-4620, and make certain that you press the one button so that we know that when the calls come in, which ones want to interrupt the program and ask a question or make a comment. Okay, please hold on. We'll be back in 60 seconds.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure Libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com.
Ranch Acres Audiology is about caring, about getting the most out of life, about personal attention.
Sometimes helping someone with their hearing is really helping them with more than just hearing. That's the goal of my practice. That's what my goal has been for 20 years.
You're invited to attend our next free Lunch and Learn seminar. Call us today, 918-749-7711.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Liberty Talk Radio. Today our guest is Jeffrey Tucker. He's the Director of Digital Development for the Foundation for Economic Education, an organization which I financially support, have been a member of for many years, as well as the Chief Liberty Officer of Liberty.me, a global liberty community of which I'm also proud to be a member of. I scored 2 for 2 on that one. That's very rare, but I do in this case. Now, we're talking about...
Speaking of FEE, it was founded in 1946. And in many ways, it was a kind of an immigrant service organization, because that's where Mises got his job.
Oh, I see.
When he came over to the U.S. and the Foundation for Economic Education bought the first run of Human Action, his big book that came out in 1949, which is why the publisher published it in the first place. Yeah. They took care of Rand, who was an immigrant. They took care of Hayek, who was an immigrant. I mean, that whole generation of free market intellectuals, if we had bans on immigration, we wouldn't even know who these guys were.
Yeah. Are any of the presidential hopefuls, Republican or Democrat side, speaking about open borders? I mean, a proponent of open borders? No,
I mean, the whole thing has become like a taboo topic. I mean, I was disappointed even that Rand kind of jumped on this. Do you remember that? I mean, there were moments in Rand's candidacy that were awesome, and there were other moments where you just kind of deflated, like, oh, God, I can't believe this. But when the whole Syrian refugee crisis came along, he had a perfect opportunity to argue for the libertarian position, which is to allow private pro-refugee organizations and private charities to bring these people here and take care of them. We don't even allow that in the U.S. It's forbidden by law, unlike in, say, Canada, where it's encouraged, and it'll have a lot more freedom for a refugee immigration settlement and that sort of thing. Rand didn't make that argument. Instead, he argued for more government controls, and that was very disappointing. Yeah. But I think probably between all of them, he's probably he probably was the best. Nowadays, I can't really tell the difference between Trump's position and Rubio and Cruz. And actually, you know what? Jeb Bush, something tells me that he's just slightly better on this topic than other people. I mean, at least he makes noises that sound, vaguely rational about the topic.
Well, you think that's because he has a very large minority population?
Yeah, and also, he's a little bit sensitive to this issue because he married into a family that's Mexican-American, and his children are mixed race, and he, I think he's got a little broader mind on the whole topic than the rest of these guys. It sounds a little strange for me to say it, but I'm a little more sympathetic with George Bush than on this area than any of the rest of these guys, actually. and they make fun of him. But you do remember that one debate where they showed several YouTubes of like a Muslim woman saying, "Look, I'm an American. I've been here, all my life, and I'm a I'm a computer engineer, and I'm a little bit taken aback by all this anti-Islamic rhetoric from the Republicans. So it's kind of making me feel unwelcome. What's your response to that?" George Bush was the only one who said, "Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. This is the kind of voter the Republican Party needs. She's awesome. This country is a welcoming country. We're a diverse country. We don't have religious tests for migration." He said a good thing. He was actually had a fairly responsible answer. I don't know if you remember that, but it's like he's got an ear for it a little bit more than the rest of these guys.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's a big concern that we're going to convert to Sharia law if we have all these immigrants come in. Well, obviously, if you want to become a citizen of the United States, you have to pledge your allegiance to our Constitution and Bill of Rights and whatever. And if Sharia law, the strict Sharia law, the one that we hear about where women are not allowed to, if they do something, their husbands can beat them to death and it's okay, of course that would be illegal. So you cannot adhere to Sharia law and be a citizen. You'd have to break all of the tenets of the Sharia law to be a citizen. So you couldn't possibly be one. So it's inconsistent in and of itself. So that does not hold water at all. It's either you are going to allow people to be free, to do whatever they want, basically, provided that they do not infringe upon the equal right of others. Now, if a woman comes here and wants to, hold on a second, we have a problem? I'm sorry, I got a... Keep going. Okay, I just got some of the technicians are just giving me signals, and I have no idea what they're doing. Maybe they're just having a fit. But if someone comes here from a strictly Sharia law type of society, and they want to wear a burqa and fully clothe themselves, but they willingly do that, that's fine. Now, if they remove their... Oh, hold on a second. Kill that. If they do decide to take off their burqa and their husband near beats them to death, their husband should go to jail. It's not that saying, well, I'm sorry, that's your faith, that's okay for you to do that. They still must comply with the U.S. law. So it's inconsistent and illogical to say if they come here, we're going to be subject to Sharia law. The strict adherence to Sharia law.
This is also a country with, that once tried to ban alcohol consumption and production. It's a heck of a thing to hear, American politicians complain about Sharia law. This is a country where we have the highest drinking age, of 21. Apart from the only people who compete with that are extreme Islamic states, like Kazakhstan or the UAE or Saudi Arabia, So we have our own problems, with extremist puritanical laws. Look at the drug war. We still got a war on pot in this country, if you can believe it. I just took a flight where I was subjected to drug sniffing dogs at the airport, and I'm not myself a pot user, but I was feeling terrible for, a lot of my friends fly with little bags of, pot stuffed in their suitcases or whatever. And what happens if the dogs sniff that out? You're gonna be taken to jail, for days? I don't know. But all I'm saying is that it's a little funny for people to talk about the evils of Sharia law when we've got a plenty of evil baked into the existing law, which I don't know what you want to call it, but it's Christian law or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it's bad.
Right. We vilify the use of pot, but it's okay to drink yourself to death. But that's another story.
But if you have a glass of wine when you're 20. Then you go to jail. This is
that's logical to me. But it's okay if you do that in the Catholic Church and you drink your wine, during a service. That's okay. That's all. I don't understand this. Hey, I have one for you. I made this argument once, and I don't even recall what the response was, but it wasn't very very good. It was inconsistent, and people were yelling at me like heck. But I want to get your take on it. A person was talking about immigration and whatever. I said, well, you're illegal, They said, no, I'm not. I was born here. And all. I said, now, wait a minute. Your ancestors and my ancestors, going way, way back, came here. And when they hit the shores of what the mainland United States, they did a few things. They subjugated or killed the warriors. They raped the women, and they put the children into slavery. Then they took their land and whatever possessions they had. Now, did they not have to go through some sort of immigration process? And whenever I bring that up, I get hate mail. I get the response, and they're all illogical arguments. They just want to they attack me personally. But isn't that a logical argument, saying that the Indians did not beg us to come here? They did not give us green cards. They did not give us citizenship. We came here and stole their land.
Oh yeah, well, it's true for my ancestors. I had 3 ancestors that came over on the Mayflower. So you talk about an invasion, and then I had a second round of the same thing that happened. They immigrated to Texas in 1830, and eventually started a revolution that basically stole Texas from Mexico.
From Mexico, that's correct.
So I'm sorry about this history. It's pretty grim, but yeah. If there had been immigration restrictions, my ancestors wouldn't have come over on the Mayflower, and they certainly wouldn't have been able to come to Texas. Maybe they shouldn't have allowed it. Look what happened. But
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, how do we justify what we did with what the Europeans did coming here? And Christopher Columbus, he was so great, and everybody else was so great coming over here, and they braved the Atlantic Ocean. Many died coming over here, and they settled the United States. But when the Mexicans do the same thing on land, not on water, on land, coming here, many die coming here for a freer life, to make a new life here in America, where it's much more free than Mexico. In fact, I just came back from Mexico, and I found it almost depressing that I was basking in this sea of luxury where I was. I was in Cancun at a conference, and the luxury was almost obscene, and the people there make $3 a day. In fact, I tipped the guy that drove me from the airport to the hotel. It was only about a 20-25 minute ride. I gave him $5, and he had died and gone to heaven. So where's the distinction? We came from Europe, came here. Mexicans are in Mexico. They want to come here. Why is there any difference?
I don't know. I think you make a good point. In fact, because of your comments, I'm going to start referring to my Mayflower ancestors as boat people.
Oh, that's right. But that would in fact at least equal the playing field. At least we're talking apples and apples, and not apples and oranges.
Right.
But I get a lot of hate mail whenever I mention that, and I anticipate it's coming through right now on how illogical that is. But I've never had anyone, not once, and I've been doing this for 14 years, not once give me a logical response to that.
Well, I think you make a good point. I'm also glad you're talking about this issue, because I've been really disappointed with the way people in the liberty world have responded to this whole thing. I no longer can anticipate where libertarians are going to stand on this issue of immigration. There's just been a lot of confusion out there. So I don't know if you've noticed that, but in the old days, you could anticipate that everybody was for free migration. Libertarians played a very important role in advocating it. But nowadays, it's not so clear. I'm not sure what changed, but something changed over the last 10 or 20 years. But if you go back and read the writings of Murray Rothbard or Ludwig Mises or Hayek or Bastiat, for that matter, they were all for immigration, because they saw it as central to liberty, that you can't have a free society unless you have free migration.
Yeah, well,
I agree with you.
If we don't allow people to come from Mexico to the United States, and if you want to have someone sign in, have a border crossing or whatever, I guess that's okay. I guess I'm not even sure of that, but have them sign in and hold on one second, please. Would you please plug in the camera? Get from the pack, okay. Okay. We just got a warning that one of our batteries was going low. I'm sorry. Things don't seem to be going well today, but I lost my train of thought altogether. Isn't that terrible? What was I saying?
Well, I was talking about libertarians need to be at the forefront of arguing for free migration. I think it's an important role that we play. We've talked a lot about the Republicans, but the Democrats are just as terrible on this issue. Bernie Sanders was confronted about the immigration issue, and he said, "Oh, I don't want migrants coming here at all. They take away jobs from Americans and ruin the power of the labor unions in the U.S." In fact, he blamed. It was funny in an interview. He said, "Look, I don't favor free migration. That's a Charles Koch position." That's what he said.
Yeah. Well,
that was very interesting. The left is terrible on this subject.
You think the left would be open to migration, immigration, because they cater to them. Hold on 1 second. It's on this side.
They do, but they've got a problem with labor unions. That's a major constituency that they have to back. So they're torn between, on one hand, sort of monopolizing the non-white vote. On the other hand, trying to appeal to the labor union members that fund them. So there's a real problem there. So I'm not even sure that these guys are any better on the subject than the Republicans. As for Hillary Clinton, God knows where she stands on anything. I have no clue. I mean,
that's interesting because I avoid her like the plague. I'll be honest with you, and I shouldn't because I have a radio program and I should be listening more carefully. But the times that I did speak with her, after I listened to her speak, it seems that at the end I say, I have no idea what she said. I have no idea where she stands. All she wants to do is she's going to solve the problem. She's going to bring people together. She's going to lift up America. She's going to make people more wealthy. She's going to make the wealthy pay and equalize things. And don't know how she's going to do that.
And also, her favorite thing to say is that she's going to fight for us.
That's right.
I mean, I somehow, I have my doubts about this. Hillary Clinton going to Washington to fight for me against the Washington establishment. It's just that stretches credulity.
I think if she becomes elected, that would be the tipping point. I'm going to Ecuador. Yeah. I have friends that moved to Ecuador. They love it there, but the thing about Ecuador, they say, is boring. They said it's a wonderful place. Food is great. They go fishing every day and all that. He says, but if you're an active, business person in America and you move to Ecuador, you're lucky to last 2 years. Not that it's a bad place. It's a wonderful place, but it's boring.
People say this a lot about migrating out of the U.S., that they like it for a little while, then they get bored. There's aspects about American culture and life that they just mix in, whether that they miss, whether that's Costa Rica or New Zealand or wherever people go. So things have to get pretty bad to drive me out of here. And plus, I look at it like this. I know that our political situation looks pretty grim, but I think it's a sign of its collapse, not its strength, really. I think the U.S. is a little bit like what Soviet Union was like in about 1985 or something.
Right. I agree.
It seemed like the Politburo had all power, the KGB was running everything, and the whole system was deeply corrupt, and people didn't recognize it was on the verge of collapse. And that the more corrupt it got, the less plausible the whole system was. And I think that's where we are right now. That's why we have such shabby picks this year. I mean, you felt it too, right? I mean, we look at the political system and go, oh, God, there's no option left for me. But I think that's kind of what you expect in the last days of the managerial nation state that we built over the 20th century. I don't think it's sustainable in the 21st.
Right. Is there any Republican or Democrat that's still running, that you feel would be a good pick for us? The least bad, I guess. Okay, that's a good way of putting it.
That is such a tough call, and I get asked this question all the time, and I got to tell you, it's funny because I've been writing about Trump the fascist, for a long time. The problem with that is that if he does get defeated, then you're going to have somebody else, and then you've got another problem to deal with. So, so it's like no matter who you take down, there's always another one to pop up. It's like playing whack-a-mole,
Yeah. What about I know the Libertarian candidates have announced who they are, and I don't even have all their names. I know the governor of New Mexico is running.
Gary Johnson, and then that McAfee guy.
McAfee, he's been on our program, and it was great because he was the only person I ever interviewed that lit a cigarette during the interview.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But I mean, he sort of squeaks a little bit when it comes to being libertarian, and he admits it. He says, quite frankly, I'm almost pure libertarian. Almost. I'm not all the way there, but at least he's honest about it. He's sort of like a Donald Trump. He's honest about what he says, and I enjoyed the interview with him very much. I found it very refreshing.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that...
I don't know. This may be the year. Every year people say this, this is the year for the Libertarian Party. It never is. But maybe this time it is the year for the Libertarian Party. I don't know. Somebody like Gary Johnson.
Yeah, Gary Johnson.
He's a real rational. He's a rational voice for reason and sanity out there with a real track record and a lot of credibility. So I don't know. Maybe this is the year that people are going to go out there and vote for libertarians. I mean, the problem is that this is really a two-party system, and it just makes it very difficult for libertarians to get a hold there. But if they get more than 1 million votes, that by itself makes a pretty big statement. So maybe this is the year. I don't know.
What concerned me is the fact that the Libertarian Party is a registered party, I think, in 49 of the 50 states. And yet when it comes to the primaries, there's a Republican primary, a Democrat primary, but there's no Libertarian primary.
Yeah.
And, the whole system is rigged. And you think people would get to a point where saying that we know the system is rigged, what do we do about it? Well, you voted for the lesser of two evils, rather than saying, hey, maybe there's a third party and we should consider what they have to say. But they don't have that opportunity.
They don't. And then people, and I tell you something else that happens, right? When people get to the polls, they start to, even if they don't like whoever the Republican nominee is, let's say it's Cruz or something, they may not like Cruz, but then they think, well, Sanders would be even worse, so I better support Cruz. So then the Libertarian just gets kind of overlooked because people are so afraid of the option to the, one of the either the Republican or the Democrat, that they end up sort of playing the game, and so we end up just electing these same old people again and again. Yeah. It's a difficult dynamic, and it's been hard for libertarians to cut through. But as I say, maybe this is the year. I'm speaking at a number of libertarian conventions this year. I'm speaking I'm the main speaker at the Texas Libertarian Party convention.
Oh, great!
This year.
Where's that? Is that being held in Austin?
I'd have to look back. It might be San Antonio.
San Antonio.
I'm not sure. They've got me on. I don't know. Got me speaking in like 3 cities when I go.
Well, if it's in San Antonio, that's we have friends in San Antonio who are very big in the Libertarian Party and for decades, and they're always urging us. One's very ill, a husband and wife, and the husband has been very ill for 20 years now, and he's still hanging on, and they're always begging us to come down. Maybe I'll see you down there, who knows.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I've got a lot of speaking coming up, but I'm happy about the Libertarian Party thing. I've never really been much of a spokesman for the Libertarian Party as such. In fact, I'm not that interested in voting in politics anyway. But I got to tell you, this year I have gotten interested in that because it's starting to be, a serious threat. I mean, this Trump thing is what kicked that off for me. I mean, I couldn't believe this guy. The least libertarian candidate in my lifetime, I would say, probably.
Yeah.
Even though he's also the only one who makes some degree of sense on the Iraq War, actually. So he's kind of a mixed bag in a way, but I do think he's a kind of a dictator in waiting. And I'm worried about a kind of Weimar situation where, prosperity is going down, people are afraid of immigrants and foreigners, and then they vote for the domestic despot. I think it could happen in this country, and I'm very worried about it. So maybe it's time to get involved in politics. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ultimately a long-term solution for us, but if nothing else, just to do your part to try to prevent evil from getting too much control, is a good thing, I think.
Well, Jeffrey, we're just about out of time before we get shut off automatically by the system, and I'm sorry.
I'm glad you had me on. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you so much for living through all of our foibles and whatever else we had here, and we'll try to avoid doing this again in the future, which just disrupts everything. So we apologize for that. I'd like to give you the last 30 seconds, and then we can. And I do hope that you will accept our invitation to return at a later date.
Oh, I'd really like to. We've got a lot of other issues to talk about. I'm glad we talked about immigration today because I think it is such an important issue
for
our liberties.
Yes. And so let me give you the last 30 seconds to sum things up or tell our audience how they can reach you and join Liberty Me,
Yeah, join liberty.me. It's a fun community. I built it 2 years ago now, and it's a great publishing platform. I use it every single day, and thousands of others use it too. If you want to check out a wonderful think tank that I'm involved in refurbishing right now, it's Foundation for Economic Education. Our website has gone crazy. We're getting higher traffic than the Cato Institute
Great.
right now.
Wonderful.
So check it out when you have a chance.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm on that website very often. Well, thank you so much for being on our program. We hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you for having me. Take care, my friend.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.